Developing an AI cloud solution on Azure. The solution includes a Python API that receives user requests and sends long-running AI jobs to a background processor. You need to ensure that the API responds quickly and that failed jobs can be retried. Which Azure service should you use between the API and the worker? Options are A. Azure Container Registry, B. Azure Cost Management, C. Azure Service Bus Queue, D. Azure Private DNS Zone. The correct answer is C. Azure Service Bus Queue. Explanation notes. Azure Service Bus Queue is suitable when an application needs reliable asynchronous communication between components. The API can place a job message on the queue and return a response to the user immediately. The worker can process messages independently and retry failed jobs if needed. This design improves reliability and prevents long-running AI tasks from blocking the user-facing API. You are designing an AI cloud solution that uses Azure SDKs. Match each requirement to the best practice. Options are A. Avoid hard-coded secrets, use managed identity or key vault. B. Handle temporary service failures, use retries with backoff. C. Improve SDK efficiency, reuse client objects. D. Troubleshoot failures, use structured logging and telemetry. You are deploying a containerized Python AI application to Azure Container Apps. The application image is stored in Azure Container Registry. The deployment fails because the container app cannot pull the image. What should you configure? Options are A. A public DNS forwarding rule. B. Registry access for the container app identity. C. A storage lifecycle policy. D. A log analytics query. The correct answer is B. Registry access for the container app identity. Explanation notes. When Azure Container Apps pulls an image from Azure Container Registry, it needs permission to access the registry. This can be done by configuring registry credentials or using a managed identity with the appropriate pull permission. Without image pull access, the container app cannot download the image and the deployment fails. Drag drop. You are designing a document ingestion pipeline for an AI application. Documents are uploaded by users and must be converted into searchable vector content. Arrange the steps in the correct order. Options are A. Store vectors and metadata in the search index. B. Generate embeddings for each chunk. C. Store the uploaded document in Azure Blob Storage. D. Split the extracted text into chunks. The correct answers are C. Store the uploaded document in Azure Blob Storage. D. Split the extracted text into chunks. B. Generate embeddings for each chunk. A. Store vectors and metadata in the search index. Explanation notes. The document must first be stored in a durable location such as Azure Blob Storage. After the content is available, the text can be extracted and split into smaller chunks. Embeddings are generated for each chunk so semantic similarity search can be performed. Finally, the vectors and metadata are stored in a vector-enabled index or database for retrieval during AI application execution. You are developing a Python service that accesses Azure Blob Storage, Azure Key Vault, and Azure Cosmos DB. You must avoid storing secrets in application code. Which authentication approach should you use? Options are A. Anonymous access to all resources. B. A shared administrator password in the Docker file. C. Default Azure credential with managed identity. D. Hard-coded connection strings. The correct answer is C. Default Azure credential with managed identity. Explanation notes. Default Azure credential from the Azure Identity Library supports local development credentials and managed identities in Azure-hosted environments. This allows the same code to authenticate securely without storing secrets in source code. Managed identity is especially useful for deployed workloads because Azure manages the identity and credential lifecycle. Drag-drop. You are designing a secure AI application network flow. Arrange the access path in the correct order. Options are: A. Client calls secured API endpoint. B. API authenticates and authorizes the user. C. API accesses backend Azure services using managed identity. D. API returns only authorized results. The correct answers are: A. Client calls secured API endpoint. B. API authenticates and authorizes the user. C. API accesses backend Azure services using managed identity. D. API returns only authorized results. Explanation notes. The client should call a secured backend API instead of accessing backend resources directly. The API validates the user, accesses Azure services using a managed identity, enforces business rules, and returns only authorized results. This protects secrets and backend data. Hotspot. You are configuring an Azure app service that hosts a custom container. The container listens on port 8000. The application starts successfully, but the site does not respond to HTTP requests. Which configuration should you update? Options are: A. Storage account replication type. B. Key vault soft delete setting. C. Application setting for the container port. D. Azure DNS-TTL value. The correct answer is C. Application setting for the container port. Explanation notes. When a custom container listens on a non-default port, the hosting platform must be configured to route traffic to the correct port. In Azure App Service, this is commonly handled through an application setting that identifies the port used by the container. If the platform expects a different port, the container may run, but the application will not respond correctly. You are building an AI application that stores chat sessions as JSON documents. The application must support flexible schema, low latency reads, and global distribution. Which data service should you choose? Options are: A. Azure Backup Vault. B. Azure Files. C. Azure Cosmos DB. D. Azure DNS. The correct answer is C. Azure Cosmos DB. Explanation notes. Azure Cosmos DB is designed for globally distributed, low-latency NoSQL data storage. It is a strong fit for chat session state, user preferences, metadata, and flexible JSON document models. It supports high availability and can be used by AI applications that need fast access to session data across regions. You are designing a secure AI application network flow. Arrange the access path in the correct order. Options are: A client calls secured API endpoint. B. API authenticates and authorizes the user. C. API accesses backend Azure services using managed identity. D. API returns only authorized results. The correct answers are: A client calls secured API endpoint. B. API authenticates and authorizes the user. C. API accesses backend Azure services using managed identity. D. API returns only authorized results. Explanation notes: The correct flow starts when the client sends a request to a secured API endpoint. The API must first authenticate the identity of the caller and verify authorization before allowing access to protected resources. After validation, the API securely communicates with backend Azure services by using managed identity instead of storing secrets or credentials in code. Finally, the API applies business logic and security controls before returning only the data and results that the authenticated user is allowed to access. This layered approach improves security, reduces credential exposure, and protects backend services from direct public access. You are developing an AI cloud application that uses Azure functions to process uploaded files. The function must run automatically whenever a file is uploaded to a storage container. Which trigger should you use? Options are: A timer trigger. B. Manual portal trigger. C. HTTP trigger. D. Blob trigger or event grid-based blob event trigger. The correct answer is D. Blob trigger or event grid-based blob event trigger. Explanation notes: A blob trigger or event grid-based event trigger can start processing when a blob is created or updated. This is commonly used in AI document processing workflows where files are uploaded and then analyzed, chunked, embedded, or indexed. Event-driven processing removes the need for manual polling. You are developing a Python application that calls multiple Azure SDK clients. The application creates a new SDK client object for every request and experiences unnecessary overhead. What should you do? Options are: A. Create a new Azure subscription for every request. B. Store each SDK client in blob storage. C. Disable authentication for the SDK clients. D. Reuse SDK client instances where appropriate. The correct answer is D. Reuse SDK client instances where appropriate. Explanation notes: Azure SDK client objects are generally intended to be reused. Reusing clients avoids unnecessary initialization and connection overhead. In high-volume AI applications, creating a new client for every request can reduce performance and increase latency. You are designing a background worker that processes AI jobs from Azure Service Bus. Some messages fail repeatedly because the input format is invalid. What should you configure? Options are A. A larger container image. B. A DNSCNAME record. C. Dead letter handling. D. A public storage container. The correct answer is C. Dead letter handling. Explanation notes. Dead letter handling allows messages that cannot be processed successfully to be moved out of the main queue. This prevents poison messages from blocking valid messages. The failed messages can later be inspected, corrected, or archived. This is important in reliable AI job processing systems. Drag drop. You are creating a containerized AI API and need to deploy it to Azure. Arrange the deployment steps in the correct order. Options are A. Push the image to Azure Container Registry. B. Build the Docker image. C. Configure the hosting service to use the image. D. Verify logs and health status after deployment. The correct answers are B. Build the Docker image. A. Push the image to Azure Container Registry. C. Configure the hosting service to use the image. D. Verify logs and health status after deployment. Explanation notes. The container image must be built first from the application source and Docker file. After the image is built, it should be pushed to Azure Container Registry. The Azure hosting platform, such as Azure Container Apps or App Service, is then configured to use the image. After deployment, logs and health status should be reviewed to confirm successful startup. You are building a RAG-based AI application. The application must retrieve documents based on meaning rather than exact keywords. What should you store in the index? Options are A. Only container image tags. B. Only raw PDF file names. C. Vector embeddings for document chunks. D. Only DNS records. The correct answer is C. Vector embeddings for document chunks. Explanation notes. Vector embeddings represent the semantic meaning of text. When document chunks are converted into embeddings and stored in a vector index, the application can retrieve content that is conceptually similar to a query. This is required for semantic retrieval in modern AI cloud solutions. You are designing an AI application that must expose a back-end API to client applications. The API must enforce throttling, authentication, and request transformation policies. Which service should you use? Options are A. Azure Container Registry. B. Azure Files. C. Azure API Management. D. Azure Private DNS Resolver only. The correct answer is C. Azure API Management. Explanation notes. Azure API Management is used to publish, secure, monitor, and manage APIs. It supports policies such as rate limiting, authentication, header transformation, and quotas. This makes it useful for protecting AI backend APIs from uncontrolled or unauthorized usage. Hotspot. You are troubleshooting a production AI API. Users report slow responses. You need to identify whether the delay is caused by the API code, Azure Storage, Cosmos DB, or an external dependency. Which feature should you use? Options are A. Azure DNS Zone Export. B. Application Insights Dependency Tracking. C. Container Image Retention. D. Storage Static Website Hosting. The correct answer is B. Application Insights Dependency Tracking. Explanation notes. Application Insights Dependency Tracking helps identify calls made from the application to downstream services and shows latency, success, and failure information. This is useful when an AI application depends on databases, storage accounts, queues, model endpoints, or external APIs. It helps locate the actual source of delay. You are configuring a Python AI worker that receives service bus messages. A message should be removed from the queue only after the AI processing completes successfully. What should the worker do? Options are A. Ignore message locks. B. Delete the message before processing starts. C. Store the message in a Docker label. D. Complete the message after successful processing. The correct answer is D. Complete the message after successful processing. Explanation notes. With reliable message processing, the worker should complete the message only after the job succeeds. If the worker fails before completion, the message can be retried or eventually deadletted. This prevents job loss and supports reliable asynchronous AI workflows. You are developing an AI cloud solution. The solution stores API keys and connection strings. Developers must not see production secrets, but the application must access them at runtime. Which service should you use? Options are A. Azure Monitor Workbook. B. Azure Load Testing. C. Azure Key Vault. D. Azure Container Registry Tasks. The correct answer is C. Azure Key Vault. Explanation notes. Azure Key Vault securely stores secrets, keys, and certificates. Applications can access secrets at runtime by using managed identity and appropriate permissions. Developers can be prevented from reading production secrets by applying least privilege access control. Drag-drop. You are designing secure access from an Azure-hosted container app to Azure Key Vault. Arrange the steps in the correct order. Options are: A. Retrieve the secret at runtime. B. Grant the identity permission to read secrets from Key Vault. C. Enable managed identity on the container app. D. Use Azure Identity in the application code. The correct answers are C. Enable managed identity on the container app. B. Grant the identity permission to read secrets from Key Vault. D. Use Azure Identity in the application code. E. Retrieve the secret at runtime. Explanation notes. The workload first needs a managed identity. That identity must then be granted the required Key Vault permission. The application code can use Azure Identity libraries to authenticate without storing credentials. Finally, the application retrieves the secret securely at runtime. You are building an AI cloud solution that processes telemetry events from thousands of devices. The system must ingest a high volume of streaming events. Which service should you use? Options are: A. Azure DNS. B. Azure Backup Center. C. Azure Event Hubs. D. Azure App Configuration. The correct answer is C. Azure Event Hubs. Explanation notes. Azure Event Hubs is designed for high-throughput event ingestion and streaming workloads. It can ingest large volumes of telemetry, logs, and event data. AI applications can then process these events for analytics, scoring, or downstream automation. You are developing a workflow where a document upload should notify several independent services. Each service must receive its own copy of the event. Which messaging pattern should you use? Options are: A. A single environment variable. B. Local file polling. C. Publish subscribe with topics and subscriptions. D. Point-to-point queue only. The correct answer is C. Publish subscribe with topics and subscriptions. Explanation notes. Publish subscribe messaging allows one event to be distributed to multiple independent consumers. Azure Service Bus topics and subscriptions are commonly used for this pattern. Each subscription can process the event independently without blocking other subscribers. You are configuring observability for a distributed AI workflow. You need to trace one user request across the API, queue, worker, database, and storage calls. What should you implement? Options are A. Public access to all logs. B. Manual screenshots of every request. C. A different container image for each log line. D. Correlation IDs across services. The correct answer is D. Correlation IDs across services. Explanation notes. Correlation IDs allow logs and telemetry from different components to be linked to the same request or job. This is important for distributed AI applications where work moves through APIs, queues, workers, and databases. Correlation makes troubleshooting and latency analysis much easier. Hotspot. You are deploying a Python Azure function. You want to test the function locally before deployment. Which tool should you use? Options are A. Azure Pricing Calculator. B. Azure Functions Core Tools. C. Azure Backup Explorer. D. Azure DNS Manager. The correct answer is B. Azure Functions Core Tools. Explanation notes. Azure Functions Core Tools allow developers to run and test Azure functions locally. This is useful for validating triggers, bindings, configuration, and Python code before deployment. It helps identify issues earlier in the development process. You are creating a nightly AI batch job that processes accumulated records. The job must run every day at 1 a.m. Which Azure Functions trigger should you use? Options are A. Queue trigger. B. Blob output binding. C. HTTP trigger. D. Timer trigger. The correct answer is D. Timer trigger. Explanation notes. A timer trigger runs an Azure function according to a schedule. It is suitable for nightly processing jobs, cleanup tasks, synchronization, and scheduled AI workloads. The schedule is commonly defined by using a cron expression. You are developing an AI application that uses Azure Cache for Redis. The application repeatedly receives the same user query and generates the same response. Why should you use Redis in this solution? Options are A. To replace all identity controls. B. To configure private DNS. C. To store container images. D. To cache frequent responses and reduce back-end calls. The correct answer is D, to cache frequent responses and reduce back-end calls. Explanation notes. Azure Cache for Redis provides low latency in-memory caching. It can reduce repeated calls to databases, search indexes, or model endpoints when the same results are requested frequently. This can improve performance and reduce cost in AI applications. You are building a container image for a Python AI application. The final image is very large because it includes build tools and temporary files. Which Docker approach should you use? Options are A, DNS delegation, B, multi-stage build, C, manual VM backup, D, public anonymous registry access. The correct answer is B, multi-stage build. Explanation notes. Multi-stage builds allow one stage to install build tools and prepare dependencies, while the final stage contains only the runtime files needed by the application. This reduces image size, improves deployment speed, and reduces attack surface. You are designing a solution that stores large uploaded files for later AI processing. The files include PDFs, audio files, and images. Which Azure service should you use? Options are A, Azure Policy Only, B, Azure Blob Storage, C, Azure DNS, D, Azure App Configuration. The correct answer is B, Azure Blob Storage. Explanation notes. Azure Blob Storage is designed for unstructured object data such as documents, images, audio files, and videos. AI applications commonly use blob storage as an input location for document processing, transcription, image analysis, and embedding pipelines. You are developing a Python application that uses default Azure credential. The application works in Azure but fails locally during development. What should you do? Options are A, disable all Azure authentication, B, rename the Python file to credential.py, C, move production secrets into the source code, D, sign in with Azure CLI or configure supported developer credentials. The correct answer is D, sign in with Azure CLI or configure supported developer credentials. Explanation notes. Default Azure credential checks multiple credential sources. In Azure, it can use managed identity. Locally, the developer must authenticate by using a supported development credential such as Azure CLI, Visual Studio Code, or environment variables. If no local credential is available, authentication fails. Drag drop. You are designing a reliable AI job processor. Arrange the steps for processing a queue message safely. Options are A. Receive and lock the message. B. Process the AI job. C. Validate the message payload. D. Complete the message after success. The correct answers are A. Receive and lock the message, C. Validate the message payload, B. Process the AI job, D. Complete the message after success. Explanation notes. The worker receives and locks the message so another worker does not process it at the same time. The payload should be validated before expensive processing begins. After the AI job succeeds, the worker completes the message. If processing fails, retry or dead letter behavior can handle the message according to the configured policy. You are building an AI application that uses Azure App Configuration. Which type of data is most appropriate to store in Azure App Configuration? Options are A. Container image layers. B. Application settings, feature flags, and prompt template references. C. Encrypted virtual machine disks. D. Large raw video. The correct answer is B. Application settings, feature flags, and prompt template references. Explanation notes. Azure App Configuration centralizes application configuration and feature flags. AI applications can use it to manage endpoint names, model deployment names, prompt template references, feature switches, and environment-specific settings. Large files and container images should be stored in services designed for those purposes. You are designing a production AI API. The API must prevent one client from consuming all available capacity. Which API management feature should you configure? Options are A. DNS zone lock, B. Rate limiting or quota policy, C. Container image cleanup, D. Blob immutability policy. The correct answer is B. Rate limiting or quota policy. Explanation notes. Rate limiting and quota policies control how many requests a client can send during a specific time period. This protects back-end AI services from overload and helps control cost. It also supports fair usage across multiple clients or tenants. Hotspot. You are troubleshooting a containerized AI application in Azure Container Apps. The latest revision is not receiving traffic. Where should you check first? Options are A. Azure DNS MX record, B. Revision status and traffic routing configuration, C. The Azure portal color theme, D. Storage account access tier. The correct answer is B. Revision status and traffic routing configuration. Explanation notes. Azure Container Apps supports revisions and traffic routing between revisions. If the latest revision is healthy, but not receiving traffic, the traffic routing configuration may still point to an older revision. The developer should also check revision health, logs, and startup status. You are developing an AI solution that must store structured business records such as invoices, customers, and transactions. The data requires relationships, SQL queries, and transactional consistency. Which service should you use? Options are A. Azure Container Registry, B. Azure Monitor Alerts, C. Azure SQL Database, D. Azure DNS. The correct answer is C. Azure SQL Database. Explanation notes. Azure SQL Database is suitable for relational data that requires tables, relationships, constraints, and SQL queries. AI applications often use relational databases for business data while using other services for files, queues, caches, and vector indexes. You are developing a Python AI worker. The worker processes large PDF files from blob storage and sometimes runs out of memory. What should you do? Options are A. Convert the file name into a DNS record. B. Stream file content in chunks where possible. C. Load all files fully into memory every time. D. Store the file content in environment variables. The correct answer is B. Stream file content in chunks where possible. Explanation notes. Streaming large files in chunks reduces memory pressure and improves reliability. AI processing workloads often handle large documents, audio. You are building an AI application that calls an external service. The service sometimes returns HTTP 429 responses. What should the application implement? Options are A. Disabled exception handling, B. Hard-coded administrator credentials, C. Unlimited immediate retries. D. Retry logic with exponential backoff. The correct answer is D. Retry logic with exponential backoff. Explanation notes. HTTP 429 indicates throttling or rate limiting. Retry logic with exponential backoff waits progressively longer before retrying, which reduces pressure on the service and increases the chance of success. This is an important resiliency pattern for AI cloud applications. Drag-drop. You are configuring monitoring for an AI cloud solution. Match the requirement to the correct Azure capability. Options are A. Notify when failure rate is high, Azure Monitor Alert. B. Track request flow across services, correlation ID. C. Collect application traces and dependency calls, application insights. D. Query operational logs, log analytics workspace. The correct answers are C. Collect application traces and dependency calls, application insights. D. Query operational logs, log analytics workspace. A. Notify when failure rate is high, Azure Monitor Alert. B. Track request flow across services, correlation ID. Explanation notes. Application insights collects application telemetry such as traces, exceptions, requests, and dependencies. Log analytics stores and queries operational logs. Azure Monitor Alerts notify teams when metrics or log conditions are met. Correlation IDs connect telemetry across distributed services. You are building an AI processing workflow. The API should accept a request, create a job record, place a message on a queue, and let the user check job status later. Which design pattern is this? Options are A. Static website hosting. B. Asynchronous job processing. C. Manual desktop processing. D. DNS-based execution. The correct answer is B. Asynchronous job processing. Explanation notes. Asynchronous job processing is used when work may take too long for a synchronous request. The API records the job, queues the work, and returns quickly. A background worker processes the job, and the user can check job status later. This pattern is common in AI document processing and long-running inference workflows. You are designing a secure AI backend. Client-side JavaScript must not directly access Azure storage using privileged keys. What should you do? Options are A. Make all storage containers public. B. Disable authentication for performance. C. Use a secured backend API to mediate storage access. D. Place storage keys in browser code. The correct answer is C. Use a secured backend API to mediate storage access. Explanation notes. A backend API can authenticate users, validate requests, enforce authorization, and access storage securely. Privileged keys should never be exposed in client-side JavaScript because users can view and misuse them. This design protects storage resources while still allowing controlled user access. Hotspot. You are creating a KQL query to find failed AI job executions in Azure Monitor logs. Which language should you use? Options are A. HTML, B. Custo Query Language, C. CSS, D. Markdown. The correct answer is B. Custo Query Language. Explanation notes. Azure Monitor Logs uses Custo Query Language, commonly called KQL. KQL is used to query logs, traces, exceptions, custom events, and metrics. It is important for diagnosing failed jobs, slow dependencies, and production issues in AI cloud solutions. You are developing a vector search solution. Each document chunk must include information about the source document, page number, and security group. Why should this metadata be stored with the vector? Options are A. To replace authentication, B. To support citations, filtering, and access control, C. To avoid creating embeddings, D. To reduce all storage costs to zero. The correct answer is B. To support citations, filtering, and access control. Explanation notes. Metadata helps the application filter results, enforce access control, and show citations to users. In a RAG application, metadata such as source file, page number, tenant, department, or security group is often required to return trustworthy and authorized results. You are building an AI app that uses service bus messages. Some jobs take longer than the message lock duration and are processed twice. What should you configure? Options are A. DNS-based locking, B. Message lock renewal or longer lock duration, C. Immediate message deletion, D. Anonymous queue access. The correct answer is B. Message lock renewal or longer lock duration. Explanation notes. If processing takes longer than the lock duration, the message can become visible again and another worker may process it. The application should renew the lock or configure an appropriate lock duration. Long-running jobs may also need a design that separates the job state from the message. You are using Azure Container Registry for frequent AI application builds. Old images are increasing registry storage usage. What should you configure? Options are A. Key vault certificate rotation only. B. Image retention or cleanup automation. C. Public read access to all images. D. Azure DNS recursion. The correct answer is B. Image retention or cleanup automation. Explanation notes. Frequent builds can leave many old image tags and layers in the registry. Retention policies or cleanup automation help reduce storage usage and keep the registry organized. This is especially useful in C/CD workflows where images are built regularly. Drag drop. You are designing a secure configuration strategy for an AI application. Match each data type to the best location. Options are A. Feature flags and endpoint names, Azure App Configuration. B. Secrets and API keys, Azure Key Vault. C. Uploaded documents, Azure Blob Storage. D. Operational traces, Application Insights. The correct answers are B. Secrets and API keys, Azure Key Vault. A. Feature flags and endpoint names, Azure App Configuration. C. Uploaded documents, Azure Blob Storage. D. Operational traces, Application Insights. Explanation notes. Secrets belong in Azure Key Vault. Runtime settings and feature flags belong in Azure App Configuration. Uploaded documents should be stored in Blob Storage. Operational telemetry such as traces, requests, exceptions, and dependencies should be sent to Application Insights for monitoring and troubleshooting. You are developing an AI cloud application with separate development, test, and production environments. What should you do to reduce deployment risk? Options are A. Deploy directly to production without testing. B. Use separate configuration, identities, and deployment stages. C. Use one shared production secret everywhere. D. Store all configuration in source code comments. The correct answer is B. Use separate configuration, identities, and deployment stages. Explanation notes. Separate environments help teams test changes before production deployment. Each environment should have its own configuration, permissions, identities, and secrets. Controlled deployment stages reduce risk and make AI application releases more reliable. You are designing an AI application that should use private connectivity to Azure storage where supported. Which feature should you configure? Options are A. Public container listing. B. Anonymous public access. C. Private endpoint. D. Shared browser cache. The correct answer is C. Private endpoint. Explanation notes. A private endpoint enables private network connectivity to supported Azure services through a virtual network. This helps keep traffic off the public internet and supports enterprise security requirements. Private endpoints are commonly used for storage, databases, Key Vault, and other back-end services. Hotspot. You are troubleshooting a private endpoint connection to Azure storage. The application cannot resolve the storage account to the private IP address. What should you check first? Options are A. The application logo. B. Container image label. C. Private DNS zone configuration. D. Azure portal language. The correct answer is C. Private DNS zone configuration. Explanation notes. Private endpoint connectivity often depends on correct private DNS configuration. If DNS does not resolve the storage account name to the private endpoint IP address, the application may attempt to connect to the public endpoint or fail. DNS configuration should be checked early when troubleshooting private endpoint access. You are developing a cloud AI solution. The application must upload a generated report to blob storage and give the user temporary read access. Which feature should you use? Options are A. Container registry webhook. B. DNS forwarding rule. C. Shared access signature. D. Azure monitor metric alert. The correct answer is C. Shared access signature. Explanation notes. A shared access signature can grant limited access to a storage resource for a specific time and permission scope. It allows users to download generated files without exposing the storage account key. This is useful for AI applications that produce reports, transcripts, or process documents. You are developing a Python AI service. You need to store custom telemetry such as documents processed, embedding failures, and queue retry count. What should you do? Options are A. Store metrics only in code comments. B. Disable logging to improve visibility. C. Omit custom metrics and events to Application Insights or Azure Monitor. D. Use DNS records as counters. The correct answer is C. Emit custom metrics and events to Application Insights or Azure Monitor. Explanation notes. Custom telemetry helps monitor business-specific and application-specific events that platform metrics do not capture automatically. AI applications often need to track document counts, embedding failures, queue retries, model latency, and processing outcomes. Application Insights and Azure Monitor can store and analyze this telemetry. You are creating an AI worker that processes many queue messages at the same time. The downstream database begins throttling requests. What should you implement? Options are A. Unlimited parallelism, B. Concurrency control and back pressure, C. Public database access, D. Immediate retries without delay.